ready to go.
Thomas Holt, if you would come up, and Thomas, we're going to have you actually explain your position, because I know you serving on your board at Cyber, MSU Cyber. Come on up here, I'll give you a mic, and are you lavaliered already? Yeah.
I think it's on now.
Right.
Can everybody hear me?
Thomas, come on up.
All right. While I go up there, I guess, the Michigan State University International Business Center, Senator Peters is not totally looped in on this one yet, but certainly Senator Stabenow has been a fantastic supporter. So we are a federally funded international business center. There are only 17 universities in the country. 4 in the Big Ten Conference, to give you a little bit of a scope. There are 14,100 companies from the state of Michigan that went international last year doing something. 91% of those are small and medium-sized companies, and we've had touch points with about 2,000 of them. So part of what we do is to help U.S. businesses become more competitive globally, and Senators Levin and Stabenow helped us out to get our last grant a couple of years ago, and we're due for renewal next year, so we'll be back and hang out with both senators next year, I guess. But it's a fantastic opportunity for the state of Michigan. 2,000 companies out of 14,000 that we have touch points with, I think is very, very beneficial for our particular audience.
Great stuff. All right. Thomas, you're right at the end there. Just back up. Can you hear this? Yeah. Okay, good. Sorry. Okay, next up, the senators one at a time. Debbie Stabenow. It always seems awkward because I've known Debbie, you know, the other day I was thinking like 35 years or something ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
And I always want to just say, well, here's Debbie. Come on up, Debbie. Because she's such a piece of this community, such a part of the fabric of what we are. She's been our senator as long as we can remember, but certainly not long enough. And we appreciate everything she does. So please welcome Senator Debbie Stabenow.
Thank you. Do you want me just to come up and sit down? Yes, I'll just come up. All right. Thank you.
All right, and with that, our newest senator, who has already shown his influence in D.C. and certainly in this state of Michigan, former representative and good friend. And I got to tell you, guy on the side of business, he understands what that is. And military guy, really empathetic with a lot of different pieces of our tapestry that we call Michigan here. Please welcome U.S. Senator Gary Peters.
All right. Hey.
Nice to see you.
Did you go down to see the rocket?
Yes.
That's great.
All right, so with that, whoops, we up. With that, I think what we'd like to do is, Debbie, we'll start
Yes.
with you.
Yes, sir.
Just kind of a quick statement, and I think people don't realize maybe some of the committees you serve on and some of the things you do.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to be here with Gary. We really are the 1-2 punch for Lansing and for Michigan. And before I say something about that, I just want to brag a couple more things. You know, I was thinking about, Chris, this community and everything that's done, and it was really reflected in who spoke this morning, is about partnerships, right? It's state government, it's Michigan State, it's Lansing Community College, it's the airport, it's local units of government, state government, it's everybody working together. That really is a theme of success in terms of what you can do. And when we think about bringing in American Airlines, you know, first Sun Country, and then I about died when they said they were leaving, and so we went back to work and brought in American Airlines, but also Port Lansing and the customs facility, the fact that you can fly into our airport, the only one in Michigan outside Detroit, and get your customs, your products cleared and so on. I mean, the economic engine of the airport, the economic engine of Michigan State in terms of FRIB and everything that's being done, Thomas, all the things that you're doing, incredible economic engine, and all the entrepreneurs, everybody Bob's working with, I mean, all the entrepreneurs, because we all know that the majority of jobs come when somebody decides to risk their own capital, you know, do the second mortgage on the house or max out the credit cards or go find some way to create that small business. So I was looking at our rankings. I just want to quickly say Lansing ranked #1 in the state of Michigan and 6th in the U.S. for high-tech job growth. Lansing was named 16th brainiest city by, it was Chris that brought that down a bit. We would have been higher.
That was good.
I don't know. 16th brainiest city by the Atlantic City Place publication. MSU's Broad College of Business MBA program ranked the best in the U.S. for placement success by Financial Times. Austin, Chicago, Boston, and Lansing are named the nation's among the top 10 best cities for young adults by Kipling. And Lansing, East Lansing region ranked the best in the U.S. for job growth in goods produced, manufactured, transportation, utility jobs by the Urban Institute's Metro Trends. And so I mention that just because, we've got a lot to be proud of, and the question is, how do you build on that? 8 years ago, our unemployment rate in Michigan was 15.7%. And we didn't know if we were going to have an automobile industry. And fast forward, as of July, the unemployment rate was 4.5. And the auto industry had their best year ever last year. So I think the question is, how do we keep that going? Because the story underneath the 4.5 is not everybody's in the same job making the same pay. People got hit on their mortgage and equity in their house, and they're working, but they may be working for half of what they were working for before. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. Getting the cost of college down, filling those vacancies. National manufacturers tell us, as Chuck knows, that there's at least 600,000 unfilled jobs in manufacturing in the United States right now because of the fact that we've got people with skills, but they're different skills than what the jobs are. And so that matching that up. So the kinds of focuses that I have, and I do this from a finance committee standpoint, as well as leading us on agriculture. And by the way, once you get outside of Lansing area, you're talking rural economic development, where a lot of the partnerships are being funded through the USDA. But energy committee and also budget. It's about doing everything we can around job training and education, bringing the cost of education down and job training so that everybody has access to the great turnaround that we have seen. It's tax policy, international tax policy. We're out of whack. We've got a lot of work to do. I expect us, with any luck, depending on what happens in the election, to be in a spot to do major tax reform next year. The good news is, last year at the end of the year, we did 3 things important for us. Small business expensing, 179 expensing, was made permanent. It's always kind of limped along year to year. We expanded the R&D tax credit to help more startups. And then finally, I was able to get accelerated depreciation extended, which is something that not everybody in the country appreciates. It's used mostly by manufacturing, and there's a lot of folks in other places that would actually like to get rid of that. So the tax policy piece is important, the education piece, and then again, access to capital, whether it's SBA. Gary and I, when Gary was in the House, he led an effort on what's called the State Small Business Initiative, and Carl and I led it in the Senate. We're now partnering on this. Michigan created something to create a pot of dollars to work with a business and a bank to be able to create a way for them to be in a better position to borrow, to get the capital they need. We've done so well that we're basically out of money, or just about out of money related to that through MEDC. It needs to be extended. We're working very hard to do that, to get that extended around capital. So there's a lot to be done. We can talk about during questions, but for me, it all goes back to, again, how we partner between public and private sector. It's not public or private sector. And if there ever was the poster child for that, it's this community, this region. It's about leveraging the public assets and the private assets, getting out of the way to let entrepreneurs move ahead and do everything that business needs to do, and then have the public sector come in, whether it's education, infrastructure, research partnerships, to leverage what can be done to make sure that we're operating on all cylinders. And if there's anything that we know how to do in Lansing, it's operate on all cylinders. So, thanks.
Nice auto analogy.
Do you like that?
Okay.
All right.
All right. Senator Peters.
Well, thank you, Chris. Well, as the junior senator from Michigan, I've got to follow Debbie, who takes all this great material before me. So you always got to be real creative as to other issues to take. But I just want to say with Debbie, she is. It's really wonderful to be with her, and I think it was quite evident. From her comments, she is a big Lansing booster as well, and cares deeply about this community, has had the privilege of representing this area for many years, and continues to represent the whole state, but continues to really be passionate about Lansing as well. And the one thing I think that we do share, though, that we're both very proud of, we're both graduates of Michigan State University.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Go green, huh?
That's right. See, I saved that for you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So I am very proud of
Yes,
all that
yes.
Michigan State does and the FRIB and other things that are involved in your international programs. I look forward to working on that next grant with you as well as we go forward. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll be fairly brief so we can get, I know you got a number of questions here, but I always enjoy being with the business community. I spent 22 years in the investment business. I have a long private sector background, which I bring to my public service. When I was in the House, I was in the Financial Services Committee, which dealt with all the banking, financial issues. Now in the Senate, I'm on the Commerce Committee, Transportation Science Committee, which basically has oversight over the entire economy, with the exception of banking and energy, but everything else. So auto industry has been a major focus of mine since day one, will continue to be. I think we'll probably talk about what's happening there, particularly with the new autonomous vehicles, really the new transformational technology that's coming online. That is probably as big, if not bigger, than when Henry Ford had the first car off the assembly line. I mean, it's pretty amazing what's going to happen with vehicle-to-vehicle technologies, and then eventually fully automated vehicles that drive themselves, which is just a few years away. It's not very far away. It won't be long when you'll be able to take your phone and call up an Uber, and it'll show up, and there won't be a driver in the Uber car. You'll just get in, put in the address, and it's going to take you there. So you can just imagine the implications that has, and we can talk about some of that, but we're just a few years away. However, I want to make sure Michigan continues to be the center of that. So we have been working to make sure that the National Center for Testing is here in Michigan, because that's going to mean a lot of business opportunities all across the board. I also serve on Small Business Entrepreneurship Committee, so the issues related to small business, the engine of growth, is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. I'm on Homeland Security Committee as well, cybersecurity in particular, which I think from a national security basis is probably the most significant threat that we face as a country, are cyber attacks. We have seen those repeatedly from not just bad folks, smaller criminal organizations, but actually state-sponsored cyber attacks that are a significant threat to our future. And then finally, I'm on the Joint Economic Committee as well, which takes a broader view of the economy. So I look forward to working closely with all of you. You are the lifeblood, you are the heart and soul of this community as leaders of Lansing. This is where the rubber meets the road. Another auto analogy there, right? Rubber meets the road is with this group, and look forward to working with you and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you for that kind of brief overture, so to speak. And I know that, Debbie, you alluded on this, but maybe we'd like to hear from each of you on small business's number one issue, which is talent. And I know you talked about it a little bit, but what can you bring from the legislative side to kind of help with that circumstance?
Well, one of the things that I've done is introduced a bill called New Skills, New Jobs, which leverages basically something that Michigan started a number of years ago under the previous administration, of working directly with community colleges and businesses to identify specific jobs that you need, specific skills. Who are the people that you need? You need 20 people, you need 10 people, you need 50 people with specific skills. The community college trains them for you, and then when they go to work, part of their state income tax is captured to repay the community college. It's like what would be a TIFA in economic development, but it is related to education. The problem has been in Michigan, and this is done in several states now, but in Michigan it's been capped at a total expenditure of $50 million. I don't believe that's been raised. It's been talked about being raised, but there's 3 times, 4 times more need. And so I've introduced a bill that would match federal dollars with state dollars so that twice as much could be done with specific training for businesses. And the other thing that I would say is I think we really need to rethink what we are doing on applied math and science in schools. I mean, I feel like we went from, having, the shop class and all the efforts going on when we were growing up to way over on the other side now, and we need to come back and be talking much more about a path from high school, community college and on, and how we can make it exciting, because it is exciting to go into STEM, and it's not just engineering, it's building construction trades, it's all kinds of hands-on efforts. And so I think that is a very important place that I know businesses are focused in and should be.
Gary, any comment on that?
I'll just follow up on a couple of areas, and Debbie talked about STEM education. Without question, that's probably the biggest challenge that we have, is to make sure that our young people are going into that science, technology, engineering type of studies, which you can have fabulous careers. I have worked to pass a Competes Act. We just passed out of committee, which really sets science policy, sets education policy related to science and engineering for the country. It came out of committee on a bipartisan basis, will now be heading to the full Senate floor. And it provides specifically grants to help with STEM education in K-12, but focusing even more on folks of minority groups and women in particular. We got to get much more women involved in STEM. Women tend to be extremely bright when it comes to mathematics and engineering, and yet it isn't necessarily a field that they look at. But how do we really encourage women there? They can have incredible contributions. There's an incredible amount of talent that we have to bring in. So to focus on helping those schools bring that in. The other aspect I'll just take beyond skills training, and that is something else that we think about an awful lot, and that's the high cost of education. How do we bring down the cost for students that are getting associate's degrees or bachelor's degrees, although you don't need to have those for some of these great jobs. But one thing in particular that I'm working on with one of my Republican colleagues is to expand some of the concurrent enrollment, dual enrollment programs that we have in our high schools with our community colleges. Michigan has a number of those programs now, but we can do a whole lot more. It's usually more of a resource issue. But when you think about these classes, you can get college credits while you're still in high school, so it brings down the cost of education. In fact, a concurrent or dual enrollment program, some students, when they walk across the stage to get their high school diploma, can have 35 or 40 college credits by the time they graduate from high school. And that's your freshman year pretty much taken care of. That reduces the cost by 25%, which is a significant dent on the debt that students have going forward. We also find that students that are in those programs, especially if you're a first generation student, you're much more likely to actually go to college and finish. And that's the other challenge we have. Students have to finish. It's bad enough having student debt, but having student debt and not finishing college, now you're in a world of hurt. So you've got to be able to move that forward. So in Michigan, about 7% of our students have concurrent or dual enrollment. We can do a whole lot better than that, and that'll allow us to have more skilled training than that's available for businesses going out. Plus, if you get those credits while you're in high school, it can give you more flexibility to pursue more specialized type training when you get to community college or get to your four-year program going forward. So that's an area that we're working on.
Chris, could I just underscore one quick thing on that in terms of access to college? I thought was really significant. The National Association of Realtors, when they come in now with their list of priorities for us, the cost of college is one of them. And you look at it and go, well, why is that? Because young people are coming out of college with as much debt as if they bought a big house, but they can't buy a big house. They can't start a new business because of the debt that they have. And so this whole question that Gary's talking about in terms of access to college, it's directly an issue for young people. It's an issue for us in terms of having the kinds of skills that people need to have in the economy, but it is now affecting the economy more broadly in terms of debt and the lack of opportunity that people have to buy the house, start the business, and so on. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, and let me just add one more point with that too. As I talked about, and we've talked about associate's, bachelor's degrees, but you mentioned in your comments too, it's not about necessarily getting a degree. A lot of great jobs don't require that. So how can we design programs to help students who may not be getting a 2-year degree but are getting a certificate that is immediately employable? Welding comes to example. If you have a welding degree, you're going to do quite well in trying to find a job, but welding programs aren't cheap, and it could be a real impediment to someone to get that. So we are working on issues related to looking at Pell Grants, for example. Pell Grants are just for degrees, but why do they should be just for degrees? Why not specialized training that is determined by the state? So the state would have to say, these are shortage areas where we have a shortage. How can we help students get training that we know they're going to get a job once if they go through this training, but allow students who might not be able to afford those programs get in, know that they have a career path going. And that's not just with 2-year colleges. I think it's also important for us to work closely with our labor unions as well that have incredible apprenticeship programs that often don't cost the students anything, but if we can help expand those programs and provide additional resources to expand those programs where someone can get into the building trades and make a very good middle-class life. And those of you who try to hire building trades folks now know there's a real shortage of that area if we need more of those types of workers here in our state.
You know, it's interesting because you, excuse me, heard from Chuck Haddon back there. We probably are at the height of education and business working together on exactly this issue.
Right.
And a lot of things are coming out of it. Lansing Community College is doing a lot of training, et cetera. Thomas, you have a question.
First off, I'm glad you're talking about education because some in the campaign want to get rid of the Department of Education, and that's where I get all my funding. So I'm delighted that you guys want to keep the Department of Education. It sounds like...
That's really why Thomas wanted to be up here.
Yeah, that's right.
But switching back to both of the senators, you had opening statements related to the auto industry, and Ray Tadgerson is one of my co-authors on a recent book here where we talked about General Motors in Lansing, and I wanted to feed off some of the research that we did. So data suggests that for every General Motors employee, for example, in town, there are about 7,000 or so, there's a 10-to-1 multiplier effect. So there are 10 people in supplier companies, first and second tier supplier companies that actually have jobs. So 7,000 here spell out 70,000 more people in the state, 20,000 in the Tri-County area and 50,000 elsewhere. We in Lansing certainly know the importance of auto. I'm not totally sure Congress knows the importance of auto and understand the 10-to-1 multiplier effect. What can you guys do as senators to help the country perhaps understand better what the importance of auto is and how fantastically well perhaps we're doing now vis-a-vis foreign competitors?
Well, let me just say that when we were on the edge here in terms of after the financial collapse and then the auto companies weren't able to get the capital they needed and so on, I was shocked at the number of people in Congress, honestly all in the other party, that luckily not a majority, but some who just said, well, why? Literally, somebody said to me from the South, from Alabama, who will go unnamed, but if he ever comes through the airport, I told him we're putting his picture up anyways. He actually said, well, why do you need an American auto industry anyway, as long as you can buy a car? Why does it matter where it comes from? And I was like, wow.
Did you bring his picture with you?
Yeah, I got it right here on my iPad. But wow, I mean,
it's true.
And even now, I mean, so we finally get this done, thank goodness, and truly thank goodness that President Obama, and we had enough colleagues on both sides of the aisle that believed in that we got that through. The second thing that was also came right after that was a great idea, and it actually helped a lot as they were coming out of bankruptcy, but was equally as hard, actually, and that was something, do you remember Cash for Clunkers? I authored that bill that basically, to get people in to have an incentive to buy a new vehicle, to be able to try to deal with inventory so we could make more vehicles and so on. I was thrilled that Mark Zandi, one of the major economists, formerly John McCain's economist, testified in the Budget Committee that during the third quarter of I think it was 2009, when they were coming out of bankruptcy and Cash for Clunkers happened, we had our largest GDP growth in a quarter, 3%, because it was stimulating people to get back into stores. But that was also incredibly difficult. So now fast forward. Frankly, it's easier now when we can look at the numbers and the fact that this has worked. And suppliers, most of our jobs, as we know, are in the supplier base. Most of our jobs are also connected to the defense industry, as Gary and I both know, working closely with our defense industry. Huge connection between defense and the auto industry. I co-chair the manufacturing caucus with Lindsey Graham, and we are constantly now reaching out. For the first time, I'm finding more colleagues want to be part of the manufacturing caucus. They see it as the future. And so I think it's getting better just because people are understanding that if you don't make things and grow things, you don't have an economy and you don't have a middle class. And so I think it's getting better as a result of that.
Yeah, and I'll just concur with what Debbie mentioned. And I came in, when I came into Congress was in 2009, right as the auto crisis. My original House district, I had Chrysler headquartered in my House district, so I was intimately involved in making sure Chrysler was part of the rescue package. Then I got redistricted and I lost Chrysler headquarters. Then I got General Motors headquarters in my new district, so I've involved GM, and now I'm blessed to have all three, everybody, in the Senate. But I had the same experience coming in, which was, it was really amazing for my colleagues coming in. In fact, as the new freshman, the House member, we all got 1 minute to introduce ourselves to, it seems like, I don't know, like 300 groups, it seemed like. And I would always use my 1 minute to talk about how important the auto industry is for America, because it was critical for people to understand. And it didn't turn, and when I saw it, didn't turn until my colleagues had their auto dealers coming to them, who are all over the country. And auto dealers had this real, we have auto dealers here, they said, you know, in order to be an auto dealer, you actually have to have autos to sell, and you got to like make automobiles, or we aren't going to be in your community and being the good corporate citizens that so many of our auto dealers are. And so folks realize this is a national industry. This is not Michigan, this is not Ohio, Indiana, this is the entire country that's related to it. And it continues, I think the folks understand that as we go forward. But it has to be broader to manufacturing, not just autos. It has to be about making stuff. I don't think you can be a great country unless you make stuff. And so if things that I've been working on as well as related to the COMPETES Act is with manufacturing, things like the Manufacturers Extension Partnership, which we have here in Michigan, which works with smaller manufacturers. When you have the scale, it's easier to be competitive than if you're a much smaller manufacturer. You don't have the resources for human resources, for manufacturing technology, all sorts of cutting edge things. Right. So how do we make that accessible to smaller and medium-sized manufacturers? There's been a movement to cut that back, and yet if you look at a federal program, it's one of the most successful federal programs in terms of spillovers for jobs going forward. In the COMPETES Act, we are putting more resources in and allowing some of those partnerships to continue to go forward and hopefully expand throughout Michigan. A number of great companies use that now. We'll continue to do it.
Yeah. Good stuff. Debbie, you're on the head of the Ag Committee.
Right.
Obviously, and Gary, you're on the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. Tell me a little bit about the committee work that's before you and what you think needs to come through those committees to help business.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee is the breadth of the jurisdiction and issues. And basically anything dealing with economic development or support for communities outside of urban areas goes through rural economic development. And we can drive around Clinton County, Shiawassee, Eaton County, and so on. Once you get outside of Lansing, this is the Rural Economic Development Committee. And so we are in the middle of a 5-year farm bill. Every 5 years we put together economic policy, community policy, nutrition, food policy. All of the small business loans, water sewer projects, fire engines, police cars, I mean literally everything that a community is involved in some way, rural economic development is either providing a grant, a loan, in some way working with them to put together infrastructure and so on. So that's one piece. Obviously we are very involved in supporting our farmers and we've got low prices right now. We're lucky in Michigan for the most part, the weather's been good, not so good in other places, severe droughts. We are very involved in issues like fires, and again, we're lucky here. You go out to the West Coast, I mean, this is huge issues around fires and drought and so on, so we're very involved in those kinds of things. One of the most exciting efforts for me right now relates to how we connect urban communities and rural communities through expanded food hubs, farmers markets. The fastest growth in agriculture has been around farmers markets. We have a great one here. We have a great food hub in Lansing. We have local community gardens, school gardens, and we're creating new small businesses. And so I'm going to be introducing a bill on urban agriculture to support urban farmers, small businesses that grow a number of things, make products, want to sell them to your restaurant, the hospital, Michigan State. And there's more and more efforts going on in having local purchasing, and it's coming from small businesses creating local products. And there's a tremendous amount of growth going on there. And so that's a focus of mine on the committee right now, to leverage what has traditionally been viewed as rural, to understand that it can be done in an urban setting and create jobs as well.
Earlier.
Gary.
Gary.
That's right.
Your committee? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm happy with on the Commerce Committee. I mentioned some of the science-related stuff, but given the strength of Michigan State University and our research universities, that's one focus of mine, is to make sure that we get back to what we need to do in terms of investing in basic science and basic research. That is the seed corn for any kind of economic development, and the fact that you're blessed to have MSU, one of the leading research universities in the country here, is a huge driver for the economy in Lansing. But if you look at it as a country of what we spend on basic research, it is about half of what we did in the 1970s and the 60s. It is a continued downward trend. And if you look at other countries around the world, that is the opposite, where they're putting more and more into basic science. And you think we're living on a lot of those big things that came out of research in basic chemistry, basic biology, basic physics program here at Michigan State University. Something I take a great deal of pride in, especially as an alum. I tell folks, in addition to a great ag university,
that's right.
They graduate more PhD nuclear physicists than any other university in America. It's Michigan State have nuclear physicists. Let's be clear what comes out of this university.
Yay.
So how do we get more money into those areas? So part of the Competes Act is to increase that, which has big spillovers for jobs. It also helps with manufacturers to look beyond. NASA is part of the subcommittee that I'm the ranking member on. We talked about the defense industry. There's also space programs. I was just down at Cape Canaveral for a launch this last weekend with Futuromic, a former auto supplier that now makes a number of highly sophisticated products for the SLS rocket, which is the rocket ship that is going to take us back to the moon in a few years, and in 2030s will take us to Mars. So I say, in addition to making cars, we're building rocket ships to Mars here in Michigan. And so those kinds of investments will have big spillovers for the future.
Okay, let's go back to some of the numbers very quickly. With 14,000 companies from Michigan going international, 91% of them, again, were small and medium-sized. So those are companies that choose between India and Indiana, basically. And many of them go to Indiana because they don't want to figure out the risk-reward scenario. In our latest survey around the state, 86% of the companies are planning to increase their exporting in the next 3 years, which is fantastic. How can you guys be part of the solution or helping with infrastructure for these small and medium-sized companies that small businesses, they're trying to figure out day to day, and Indiana versus India and so on, that's a tough proposition.
Well, there's a number of things, but one big one is the Export-Import Bank. And we are lucky to have now
the ongoing contentious issue.
Yes, and let me just say, we have the only U.S. patent office outside of Washington, D.C. in Michigan is in Detroit because of all of the new patents being created in Michigan. And secondly, we have an Export-Import Bank office. Now, for whatever reason, when every other country in the world has assistance for their companies to export, there are a group of folks who in Congress who don't believe there's any role, frankly, for government to do anything, who have been fighting the Export-Import Bank. And when finally we were able to get it reauthorized, their next line of attack has been to stop the board members from being appointed so they can't make the loans. And so there's 5 members. They have to have at least 3 members to be able to make loans. And literally, we have some I think it's 60 businesses in Michigan right now. Most of our small business, 80% of what the Ex-Im Bank does is small business, 80% in terms of who they work with. But they're able to help make sure that when you send your product, it's great to say export, but if you don't have confidence that when you send your product you're going to get paid, or there's no process there where you feel confident, you're not going to be able to do it. And so Export-Import Bank is about supporting, as you know, that infrastructure to make sure that you can not only make the connections, and Department of Commerce is very aggressive with trade missions, and of course, Chris, you do all kinds of work around the world and in China and so on, but the trade missions and so on, but then you have to have a structure that will work with you to make sure that you are confident that you're dealing with credible people on the other end, that you're going to get paid, and so on. That's what the Export-Import Bank is all about. And it's, you know, it's sort of, in my judgment, an example of the sort of the craziness right now around in DC. But we are seeing something that has been highly successful, supported by the majority of people, reauthorized, and now some folks are holding up the appointments so they can't actually help the businesses that are there.
You know, you should know too, this is one of the few federal programs that returns profit
Yes.
Yeah, right,
to the federal government.
right.
It's highly successful.
it's-
And everybody else, by the way, has some kind of mechanism. Every other country has some kind of mechanism to support exports. And let's face it, the goal of ours should be to export products, not jobs. So whether it's tax policy, whether it's Export-Import Bank, to support financing, other things, we want everybody to be here and exporting, not feeling they have to move to another country to be able to get the support that they need.
So listen, Gary, we want to get your comments, and then know that it is 9:30, which was our scheduled time, and I know you guys are on a schedule as well. This is the problem with assembling such a bright audience, by the way. We have a plethora of really good questions here. So what we're going to do is get these questions to your staffs, and then you can answer them. We'll put them on our website. All right?
We can start getting this. I mean, I'll defer, and I don't
We
need to
can
make
try
another
to go
comment.
back
Well,
and
we'll
forth
just try to go back and forth on some of
Fast.
these.
I don't know what your time is. I
Yeah,
don't know.
thanks.
Well, I was more worried about your
Well,
schedule
we-
and anybody who has to leave then.
I don't know how much time do we
Well,
have?
unfortunately, I mean, because we
Oh,
have
we only
only
have one
one
minute?
Lansing direct flight to DC,
Oh.
we have to get in our cars and go down. You know, we have to go get to DC another way today. So so work on that, right? We need another flight. Yeah. So.
There you go. Get them a certificate.
But if we can be quick on a couple more or something, I mean,
I know where you can get a Mercedes van that is really...
Kelly,
no, it's-
Kelly, we're ready to go. Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to thank you both for being here. And Gary, I do want your response to this if there's something along those lines that you want to remark on, because we do have a second or two.
Well, I'll touch the other issue, which is related to trade, which is the trade agreements,
Yes.
which have been obviously controversial. And where I come from, we need to be thinking of trade agreements, and we have to make sure, but the rules have to be fair. I've been opposed, I'll let Senator speak for herself, but I think she's been opposed as well because of an issue related to currency manipulation. So in order to be able to promote trade broadly around the world, we just have to make sure the rules are fair. American companies, American workers can outcompete anybody in the world. I'm confident of that. But on the TPP issue, certainly our auto companies have been very outspoken. Ford Motor Company in particular. Here's where you've got both management and labor has been aligned, and Ford Motor management has been particularly outspoken about the fact that Japan, for example, engages in currency manipulation that puts an unfair advantage to their products and makes it difficult for them to compete globally. I would like to see a mechanism in those trade agreements that allows us to enforce that. It's not allowed, supposedly, but it only happens if you actually enforce it and make sure that that doesn't occur. The Chinese have been engaged in that as well. Personally, I think we can take actions. We can end that. I would even The Treasury isn't really excited about this, but I would even empower the U.S. Treasury. If you see currency manipulation on one side, then we do the other side and counterbalance. And we're a big dog in financial markets. I think you do that a couple times.
Right.
The other countries may stop doing it because they realize they can't win that battle. But we have to be more aggressive to make sure we have a fair playing field. And if we do, we can have trade agreements that will benefit big companies, small companies, medium-sized companies. All of us will benefit from it. Something we've got to really work on these next few months.
Right.
Excellent comments. Thanks so much for your time and for being here. How about a big round of applause
Thanks.
here for U.S. Senators? Thomas, I want to thank you also for helping me out up here. I appreciate that. Eagle Eye was the sponsor that I left off, and they are so instrumental to the success of our programs here. So I want you to remember that. This is a great place to have events out here. There are a couple things that we're going to do. We're going to be taking sponsor photos if you want. If your team wants their sponsor photo, we're going to take them out on the deck there. All of you, thanks for coming today. All the candid photos and these sponsor photos and everything else will be posted on the MichiganBusinessNetwork.com's website. So you can go there and get that. And that's also where you will find the response to the questions that you have asked as soon as we can get them answered by the senator staffs. So again, thanks so much. And thanks for
Chris.
the great work that you do for all of us in representing us. All right. Thank you all for coming, and
Thank
have
you.
a prosperous day.